All right. Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I am your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and joining me today is none other than Marc Perry of builtlean.com. And if you have not heard of builtlean.com, you maybe have been living under a rock. Maybe you don't have access to the internet. I have no idea, but it is just an amazing website with tons of incredible information on really transforming not only the way that you appear, but the way that you perform. And Marc is like a living embodiment of these methods. And I believe it or not, he and I have known each other for a great many years, and so we're gonna talk about that and reminisce a little bit in just a second. Before we do, I want to remind our listeners that if you have not already, you should be sure to get my free 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. As the name implies, it only takes 9 minutes to do, and what's really nice is that it's designed to be done in conjunction with your regular training, not apart from it. So you don't have to quit your program. You don't have to upend your entire routine. Just tack it on either at the beginning or the end of your regular workouts, and you're good to go. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to worry about learning anything complicated. It's just gait pattern movements like crawling, loaded carries, and other things like that that have a huge impact on basically everything that you could hope for in terms of your strength, stamina, staying power, all that other good stuff. So 9minutechallenge.com, and you can get your own free copy. And that is the number 9minutechallenge.com. I still have not had the foresight to buy 9 minutechallenge.com. I should probably do that just in case, but at any rate, there you go. So Marc, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Really pumped to be here.
You know what? We were just talking about this beforehand, and I feel like the audience needs to know is that you and I have actually met in the flesh, but in I don't want to say the strangest of all places, but in a place where most people wouldn't assume, given that both of us live in the United States at the moment.
Yes.
But we met in Israel, of all places.
It seemed random, but like I knew you were there because you
Yeah.
are, the Hebrew hammer. And so
Yeah.
I ended up, connecting with you when I was visiting my sister who was doing her medical school in Tel Aviv. And so anyways, I ended up visiting her there and she was doing her graduation. And I was like, hey, I gotta meet up with you. And I'm like, this guy, I was doing strong first. I still am interested in, doing the kettlebell training. Anyways, I know that you have been very high level, strong first. You've reached a very high level of fitness. I'm like, I've got to meet this guy. So that's when I reached out to you and we met up. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was a blast. I remember being like, I can't believe this guy knows who I am, because like, of course, I had followed, builtlean.com. I knew of the Marc Perry, and it was a very cool event. And I remember in particular, I was happy that I got to take you to one of my favorite coffee shops ever. It's this like out of the way coffee shop. I think it still exists. It was in the old neighborhood that I lived in Jerusalem, not very far away from where I lived, and like totally underrated. I mean, it was just like a bakery and that happened to serve coffee. It wasn't really like a coffee shop per se, but like almost nobody was ever there apart from to pick up orders. So it was like the perfect place to just chill, like relax, not have to shout over people. It was a good old time.
Awesome, man. No, it was fun, man. I'm just grateful that we were able to meet and connect and chat about training and I seriously, like, you've definitely been inspirational to me in terms of the results you've achieved. So, definitely congratulations there.
Well, the feelings are mutual, so I definitely appreciate that, and I can also say, I still marvel. Like I keep pretty trim, I would say, for the most part, but I marvel at what you've managed to do because you make it look so effortless. And for people who are not familiar, you are a really impressive trainer in your own right, and particularly you're especially good at getting people lean, but without any of these crazy like off the wall, like feel like you're gonna die, like pre-weigh-in type of things that people do for sports and stuff like that. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's in some sense, I think it's actually kind of more difficult to get good at that than strength training. And what I think is interesting about you, because we'll give people like the full picture, is that you were not like born lean, even though the name built lean kind of would imply, you would think, this is just the way that you were naturally built. No, you've built yourself to be lean, which is what I think is really cool.
By the way, it's an interesting point. I would change what you just said a little bit.
Please.
The actual original idea behind Built Lean is that's actually how we're built.
Ah,
We're actually built to be lean, strong, and fit. It's our natural state. When we go away from that, we're actually going away from our nature. And so if you look around the world at different Aboriginal tribes or whatever, you can look at research. They tend to have very low body fat percentages,
yeah.
the men, even the women too. So the point is you can argue that our natural state is actually to be lean, strong, and fit and healthy.
I think there's not even much of an argument to that because that's a perfect example. Like I've seen these pictures of these Aboriginal dudes, like never seen the inside of a gym a day in their lives, and they're like shredded beyond belief, like muscular. Yeah, we'll have to compare notes in some of the pictures. I mean I've seen some articles that you may have read as well, but I find them very interesting. But yeah, I agree with that, and I like the idea behind that because it's true. Like most of the places you look in the world, people are not necessarily struggling with excess amounts of fat, and the closer you are to those old school civilizations like the Aboriginals and things like that, yeah, like the more shredded and athletic they are.
Right. I mean, primitive societies or whatever, these Aboriginal tribes, they're just not, they don't have excess fat because it's like, what's the purpose of fat? It's an excess store. It's a store of energy. But if you have ever present food, like why would you need excessive fat, which precludes you from, hunting or whatever else? It just makes life a little bit harder when you have excessive body fat. Again, it serves a really useful purpose when there's no food around and you've got to last through winter. You better have a lot of body fat or you're going to die.
Exactly.
Right? But otherwise, if food is ever present, what's the purpose of having like a significant amount of body fat, which slows you down, puts more pressure on your joints? I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's just something for people to consider.
Definitely. And as the episode goes on, we're going to talk more about how people, even with the modern conveniences and comforts, can build this level of shreddedness that you just look like you could beat the brakes off anybody anytime, also without needing to actually do that. But what was interesting is before we got on this call, I was doing some reading back through some of old material that you've put together, and you were not always built lean. You've got a picture of you when you were quite a bit younger, and you looked like maybe had a little bit of excess body fat, and
Yes.
it made me very curious. What is your origin story? Like, how did you get into training in general? Were you interested in sports as a kid? Was it something you discovered as an adult or rediscovered? Give us like the origin story, if you will.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I was super into sports growing up, like major jock. Like that was my passion. Love playing all different types of sports, especially lacrosse. I ended up playing lacrosse in college. And so I was always an athlete, right? And I love sports. Like that was, one of my greatest passions. And so the challenge was, okay, so I trained at a high level in college, right? I ended up playing lacrosse at Yale, a very good strength training, Division I level. Like it wasn't a joke. Like we had really high level strength training, high level, all that kind of stuff. But then I went to Wall Street and I was sitting at a desk all day, and combined with muscle building gone wrong, all of a sudden I was eating a ton of food. I wasn't exercising much. I was drinking a bunch, and like it just was sloppy. It just got sloppy and ended up going from 165, 170. Because when I was like, and it was like a lean 165, like really, really lean 165, 170 to like 200 pounds. So I hit 200 pounds. That was the number I saw on the scale. People were like, oh, that sounds convenient. It's 200. Well, it's like, when I saw that, I was like, all right, I gotta, this is not working out. So that's when I ended up making some changes. And I was like, okay, well, how can I do this really efficiently? Because I had to work in long hours in finance, right? I was in finance, kind of working for an investment company, long hours. And I'm like, how do I do this, which is a few short workouts a week, and still stay in great shape? So it's like I can look like an athlete while being a desk jockey, sort of situation. And that was really the genesis of bullying. I ended up transforming my body. I ended up a year or two later, I helped my brother lose 20, 25 pounds. And then I was like, you know what? I had this like epiphany. I'd been part of the entrepreneurial society when I was in college, and I just like put one thing next to another. I'm like, I could see myself doing this long term. My brother's transformation, and that was really kind of the origin of Built Lean. I ended up leaving finance, started training people at their apartment gyms, and one thing led to another, and that's where things have evolved.
That's incredible. And how long ago was that? This was what it must
This
have
was
been.
literally 2008 when I
Wow.
officially left. That's a while ago. This is over, which is crazy, over 15 years ago. And yeah, never looked back.
That is a pretty incredible amount of time to spend training people, because according to my friend Yoni Levitan, who owns a gym in Toronto, 3 seasons, he said just recently, he and I were going back and forth, and I asked him, I've heard various estimates about the amount of time that people spend as trainers, and the average isn't 15 years, as you know. It's like, he said, at least in the chain he was in, it was closer to 15 months. So to have 15 years of experience, you have to have learned some really incredible things. So, like, what are some of the big, like, overarching misconceptions that people have about what it takes to get lean?
It's a great question. That question might have changed over the years, but
Yeah.
a misconception. So I guess in order to create, like, what is the misconception? So first of all, I would focus on, like, what does the misconception guys have? It's really it's impossible. They're gonna gain weight back as they losing. I'd say I'm like thinking about all the things that are coming through my head. The number one challenge, I think, for especially guys who are listening, is they have this belief that you gain fat as you age.
Mm-hmm.
It's BS, and it's not true. It's actually a limiting belief. It's ridiculous. The opposite should be happening. Your weight should be decreasing as you age, because it's going to be difficult to keep the muscle mass over time. So, yeah. Anyways, this whole concept or idea that you should gain weight as you age is absurd. That's probably the number one thing. Misconception is it takes a long time to stay fit and healthy, which is totally ridiculous, because it's a force multiplier too. In which case, when you stay fit and healthy, you give yourself more time and more energy, and you're just a better version of yourself, and you're like better to everyone else around you. So I think the amount of time it takes, that's a huge misconception. The other thing is that you have to eat like a saint and eat foods you hate every single day. In which case, no one kind of even continues going on. And so there's this diet cycle, right? Of like, okay, I'm gonna eat anything I want. That's my diet. Eat anything, and then you start feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go strict diet, and then you start getting frustrated, and people don't get out of the diet cycle. So anyways, those are the three biggest misconceptions, in my opinion.
That makes perfect sense. I think a part of the problem that you deal with is certainly the education, or how much people really know about the topic, and then what people take as just kind of like, like a fact of life, like gravity, like nobody questions.
Right, exactly.
So they just think, okay, well, I've got all of this time built up. I'm just older than I used to be. So I probably can't really accomplish anything, particularly impressive. But not only are you pointing out that it's not true, but that it is in fact BS. It's not even kind of not true. It's like completely false.
Absurd. Yeah, it's absurd. Is what it is. Yeah.
Now here's another thing then, because a lot of people, in addition to having built up, they got some extra pounds on their belt, they've got some extra mileage on their bodies. So I think one of the things that has a tendency to make people timid as well is that they think, okay, if I'm going to burn fat and I'm going to get leaner, I'm going to have to do these crazy workouts. I'm worried about getting hurt. So like, how hard do people have to train in order to get leaner?
That's a great question. I mean, well, to get leaner, all you need to do is lose fat without losing muscle. You probably don't have to train much at all. You just need to keep muscle, in which case, what do you need to do? Like maybe like a push-up or two, and like maybe some like resistance band. Like you need to do the minimal. Now to go from that level of like just losing fat and getting lean to like a little bit more of that like impressive athlete, that's a whole different ball game. But just to get lean, it's like, what do we need to do? We need to lose fat without losing muscle. That's the game. That's it. That's it.
So what is it then that makes it difficult for people? Because you brought up something I think that's very important. Or at least I believe you did, is that people are worried that once they lose the fat, that it's all going to come back. And I think that kind of plays into what we just talked about, where it's like people think I have to work really hard, and then they go on this short-term diet, after which everything goes back and everything comes back, right?
Absolutely. And so that's absolutely an important point, right? Like people have a misconception how hard it is to, lose weight. And then also we're talking about keeping it off, right? Like the yo-yo pattern. So a lot of guys have this yo-yo pattern. And it's like, well, a big reason or a big challenge is that they haven't made it a shift in their belief system. So there's a psychological component and a mind and like a mechanical. They haven't made a shift in their belief system about who they want to be. And, you know, and these beliefs, like, you know, you gain fat as you get older. If they really believe that, it's going to be really hard, right, to keep it off. And then also, you know, the belief that, you know, they're not going to be able to keep it off as they age, like that identity. Like, how important is it to you? So by the way, with the client, the work we do with our clients, so much of it is just really helping them believe that they can do it and that this is their new normal. So it's really an identity battle. It's crazy. Like, by the way, I've seen this play out so like every day. We talk to clients like this identity balance, like the old habits and the old, hey, this is how things are versus the new. And it's just this battle. Some guys make the shift quicker than others. But anyways, that's like really the crux of it is it's a psychological, a lot of it's a psychological thing. It just is. It really is.
That's been my experience too. It's like, you know, at least on the strength side of things, I think that a lot of times people come into it with the idea. I used to have a client who, I mean, very smart dude. He was like had a doctorate, I think, in sports science, but he just he wasn't sure that he would ever be able to press a 32 kilo kettlebell. And I was like, oh, dude, you absolutely can. You know, the main thing is you just got to like, you know, you got to work through the prerequisites that are going to get you up there. But like, you know, I mean, I just had no doubt in my mind. To me, it was like a foregone conclusion. I'm like, it's just a matter of time, you know, like you just got to, but yeah, but for him, I remember he would ask every so often, like, I mean, do you think that, you know, I even just taking this path and we're going down now, I'm going to get there. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. But I think the other thing is that people think that like these self-limiting beliefs are for people who don't necessarily know any better, or because I mentioned earlier, a lot of times they're just very ignorant of you know, fitness or training or whatever in general. But I think that sort of a thing can also affect people who are very, very well educated. Like this guy was brilliant, you know, and he still had that belief.
Totally. And it's almost like it's like we call it mental blocks.
Yeah.
You know, people have mental blocks. For example, let me give you an example of a mental block. Some guy has a mental block where it's like, you know, in order to have balance in my life, I need to do X, Y, Z. I need to be able to drink this amount. I need to eat these foods. It's like, well, in order to continue having balance, he's never going to get the results he wants.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's him here, there's the results he wants, and there's this impenetrable block between him and the result. And he might touch that result, but he'll never actually sustain it because there's a mental block. There's something that prevents him from achieving the result. And it's like, because I've been doing this so long, like we're big into mental blocks because it's like, hey, like I give you a plan, like I know 100% sure you're going to get the results. Like, well, why wouldn't you? Well, you're not going to follow it. Well, why would you not follow it? Well, there's something else going on. Yeah. And so anyways, we're big on mental blocks and like addressing them and helping people overcome them.
You know, and it's interesting you should mention this too, because, you know, when we talk about mental blocks or self-limiting beliefs, or really anything that has to do with success and training the mind. I had this conversation with somebody else who was on my podcast just last week, and I mentioned to him, basically, you know, it's what you're already doing, which is learning to retrain the way that you think through the body and not just by sitting around and thinking, you know, like these are the action steps you have to take. And then you kind of start to see, even if you don't see any major change, you're like, now I understand how it's possible, because I went from, you know, getting winded walking up to the stairs to not getting very winded. That's a small step, but it's huge. And now the mind starts to turn in a different direction.
You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. That's the deal. That's what happens with our clients, because when they first start, they're like, I don't know if I can do this. I failed so many times in the past. Like, oh my gosh, there's fear of doubt, right? Fear, uncertainty, doubt rears its ugly head, and it is a beast.
Yeah.
And so the only way to really to address the fear and overcome it is not to sit and meditate. Potentially, again, that can help. I don't want to say meditation is bad, but it's like just sitting down and relaxing. Like ultimately, it's little actions. And then you're like, oh, maybe I can do this. And it changed your belief system. The little actions over time, they start to build up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, then you start to believe, you're like, oh yeah, I can do that, no problem. Whereas like 2 weeks ago, you're like, no, there's no way I can do it. So it's again, it's like those through the action is really how we build that belief. Like, hey, Alex is right. I could definitely press a 32. I didn't think it was possible.
Yeah. You know, this also reminds me too, and I think you'll probably agree with this. I also think that one of the snags that people come across is that they think in terms of like their training, they think in terms of the possible rather than the practical. And what I mean by that is not that people shouldn't think about what is possible, but for instance, I had this friend who I was over at his house. This was a couple of years ago, and he's like, my cholesterol is really high. My doctor said I need to start exercising more to bring it down. He's like, I'm thinking about working out for 20 minutes a day. And he's currently doing 0 minutes. Now, you and I both know 0 to 20 is like a lot. It's kind of a big jump. It's not that 20 minutes a day is unreasonable. It's extraordinarily reasonable. But what I told him is I was like, oh, so are you going to work out for 20 minutes a day? And he's like, I mean, I think so. I'm like, how about this? What if you just commit to doing 5 minutes every day? You choose the exercise. It could be push-ups. It could be squats. But, once you've been consistent with that enough, then you can think about doing more per day. And if there are some days where you're just feeling great and you just want to keep going, you can totally do 20 minutes, but your only commitment is 5. I was like, would you do that? And he's like, yeah, I'll do that. And then, I saw him a few months later and he was like noticeably more muscular. He wasn't hitting the gym. He was just doing body weight exercises. He was doing pull-ups and push-ups and stuff like that. And he's like, man, you were completely right. And he works as I think like an addiction counselor. So he was able to use that to help other people as well. So, physician heal thyself, as they say. And he was able to prove it and then use his own experience to help other people.
Yeah. And by the way, he set himself up for failure with the 20 minutes a day. Like
Exactly.
It was only a matter of time. Maybe it was going to be 3 days, 4 days, maybe 10 days. And he was going to drop off the wagon. Right.
Yeah.
And so one other thing we talk about is all or nothing. Like there's the all or nothing attitude. That's one of the biggest challenges with yo-yo, right? It's like, oh, well, screw it. Forget it. I'm off. I'm done.
Yeah.
What you did for him, which is amazing, by the way. You gave him a gift with that because he was able to sustain it and appreciate it. And by the way, I always tell guys, how much better is 5 minutes than 0 minutes? Infinite. It's infinitely better. It's infinitely better than 0. So the point is even just a little bit. And that's one of the differences between some like guys like us who've done this for a long time is like, you don't have to have a hero workout every time. Like there's some times when like, I'm traveling, going with family, like I do just a light 5-10 minutes and that's it. It just keeps it just keeps me feeling good.
Yeah.
Like, as you know, like we don't put like this crazy expectation on ourselves because sometimes circumstances change and things don't work out as planned, right? Like, but the good thing is like we still do it. We still do it.
And the other thing people forget too is that, at least in terms of strength, and I'm sure this is the case for other qualities too, it takes a lot longer to gain strength than it does to maintain it. So, you might have to work out, let's say if you have really serious strength goals, let's say we'll be generous. We'll say like 45 minutes a day for, however many months or what have you. But when you get to a certain level and you say, okay, well, now I'm going to work more on my cardio, you want to just maintain your strength. I mean, you can get it done in like 10 or 15 minutes a few times a week. It is like mind blowing how little you actually have to do to maintain it once you've achieved it.
I totally agree. And it's amazing how high a level you can maintain. Like you can maintain very high conditioning level, strength level. And as you know, especially with kettlebells, right? Like, I mean, it's one of the most insane tools and training I've ever learned. Like, I mean, if you do a simple, for example, one of the ones I do is simple and sinister, like, dude, 15 minutes of that, even just like twice a week, like you'll be a beast, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're doing anything close to that a few times a week, like forget it.
Yeah. Fabio Zonin, who's a master SFG in Italy, I remember a number of years ago, this was probably 2014, 2015, something like that. He was doing simple and sinister just like twice a week just for conditioning because he was on a very serious like barbell program. And so he's like, I just want to keep my conditioning and general skills up. And I mean, this guy's crazy strong. I mean, he can press maybe the 60 kilo or 130 something pound kettlebell. But he was just doing it with a 32. And that was sufficient to keep his get up and his swing in good working order. So like really a small fraction of what he could have used. So now, granted, this isn't a perfect analogy because he was doing something else as well. But what you've described is exactly it. And another good example, just on in terms of like how well this works, even at really high levels. I remember many years ago, Ido Portal, whom I'm sure you're familiar with, very strong and just incredible mover. He was doing a movement practice that, it was like many hours a day of movement. And so to maintain his strength, he would just do 30 minutes of dedicated strength work per day. And we're talking about like to maintain his one arm chin up strength, his, planche push up, front levers. So these are like really, really high level skills, like with complexity far above just lifting something off the ground, let's say, not to denigrate, just standard lifting weights. It works at almost every single level. So you can be world-class strong, like Ido Portal. You can be like an absolute beast with a barbell, like Fabio Zonin, or you can be somebody like, one of us who's interested specifically in health and proper functioning of the body and being able to enjoy your life, not having to train for anything in particular. And it's all the same. It takes a lot less time to maintain than it does to gain.
Absolutely. And also, it definitely, by the way, it's challenging to make the strength gains, but it's still, I mean, depending on where someone is, it can only take a few times a week to really make amazing strength gains. Again, but I agree with you. Like, it could literally be like a few times a week for like 10 minutes to just maintain versus maybe 30 minutes or 45, whatever, a few times a week. So yeah, totally agree.
Big time. Yeah. Now I'm curious then what your own training looks like, because like I said, in fact, I saw a post that you had on Facebook recently. You got like, you walk around like 7% body fat, you make it look effortless, and you're still training hard, because I saw some of the exercises you're doing and, like you're still hitting it hard. So what does your workout routine look like now? Are you in a phase where you're working out especially strong? Are you in a maintenance phase? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. Like, it's definitely evolved over the years. Like, I've done the strong first. Like, I mean, I should say I was obsessed with strong first. Like, I did all the certifications, like the body weight, the kettlebell, barbell. And so that really helped. It actually forced me to get more flexible and improve my function, which was interesting. That was one of the best parts about it. And then I kind of, in the last kind of couple of years, I ended up not doing as much heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of took a little bit of a break, but this year I came back hard, man. It's just something within me. I'm just like, you know what? I want to train. I want to be stronger and feel that strength again. Like, I wasn't doing simple and sinister with like 32 kilos, which, by the way, this year I went from 32 to 36, which I never thought was possible. Again, that was another thing. I'm like, I didn't even think that was a possibility. I'm like, just swinging that thing almost ripped my hand off, so that, like, I literally just started doing that. I also recently swung. They don't have the beast technically. They have like 100-pound kettlebell, but I did like one arm swings with 100 pounds, which is like, I'm a 165-pound guy. Like, I'm not huge. Yeah. I did like a proper one arm swing, and like, I never would have thought that was even possible, that sort of thing. So anyways, like, this year has been so interesting in that, like, I swear I thought I maxed out my strength like 5 years ago. I was doing the strong first SFG level 2. I'm like, dude, all right, 36, not super old, but not like super young. I'm like, all right, dude, you maxed out. That was fun. Little did I know, at 41, I would have literally kept on going. My strength is literally, I'm stronger now than I was before. And it's like, it blows my mind. It is literally possible.
It's truly incredible. And, that's actually one thing that I think is really good. And this is an especially good message for, men who are in their 40s and 50s who think, my best days, they're already behind me. I would say it's fair to say, look, you're probably not going to compete in the Olympics. You're probably not going to be the fastest sprinter, among the teens and 20 somethings, because there are certain athletic qualities that, or we'll say that there are certain athletic levels that are far easier to get to when you're younger. But one of them that is a major exception is strength. And there are just so many stories that of people who get just incredibly strong as they get older, far more so when they were younger. I mean, I've got a bunch of people who fit the bill with that, in my own client roster. I'm sure the same goes for you. And a lot of times all that has to do is just, number one, making sure that you're staying consistent. And number two, you got to just enjoy the process, like if you're stressed about it all the time and you're just thinking maybe this is it, maybe this is as good as it gets, as opposed to like, let's just see what happens. We'll give it a try and, see what happens next. If you can do those things, I think you have a far better chance of getting to that, again, that one little step beyond where all of a sudden like, I didn't think I could get this far. I wonder how much farther I can get.
Crazy. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Now, in particular, we talked a bit about our own training. I'm very curious about some of the success stories because I've seen some of the stories that you've posted. I've seen some of the transformations, and I mean, it's the real deal. It's like people who go from dad bod to chad bod, which, by the way, that's the title of a future book I'm putting together. By the way,
I love it. That's funny.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that, let's say you don't have to give like all the exact details, but like, what are some of the things that you've been able to help people to do, like that you're especially proud of, like let's say taking a guy, helping him lose 50 pounds and, saving his life with like lowering his blood pressure, all these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think the things that I'm most proud of, and it's evolved over the years, is like there was literally just one Friday, like maybe it was like 2 or 3 Fridays ago, where I had Beyond, like we have a Beyond call. So when someone's done with our 12-week body transformation program, I'll catch up with them, and we'll have a call. And like within the span, like literally in the same day, I spoke to like 2 or 3 guys who lost over 20 pounds. And before that, they've been stuck for like 10 years. These are guys who either like had a weight creep, multi-decade weight creep, and they'd literally been unsuccessful, or they just been stuck in the same spot. Mm-hmm. So we're talking like challenging situations,
Yeah.
So anyways, like helping someone like that dramatically change their body and how they feel about themselves and how they look and feel and their own confidence in themselves. That is one of the best things. It's like, yeah, it's cool. Like, listen, getting someone a 6-pack, whatever, like helping someone get a 6-pack. It's like, it's, if they're hungry, it's not that difficult, right? It's not hard. But helping someone who's literally been struggling for a decade or two, helping them make a dramatic change, that for me is tremendously fulfilling. And it's something I'm really grateful for.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that these gentlemen are incredibly grateful as well, because, you think the longer that you've been doing something, the less sure you are that it can ever go any other way. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the 12-week body transformation. I'm curious about that. What all does that entail? This is like a coaching program that you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it actually ties back to what you talked about. Like, how do you help someone transform? Well, it's like taking those little actions. So It's really an action-oriented program. But what we do is I have a body transformation system that it's very similar to what I've been offering for over 10 years. And what I've proved in our personal training practice when I was doing this, 15 years ago, it's like I had a system in place that I used myself, and I continued to refine it and refined it over the years. And I made it into a 12-week program. We have exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle. And then most importantly, what's really changed our success rates, like through the roof, is we have one-on-one accountability and guidance with coaches. So we have the app. So we have the transformation system through an app, so it's easy for people to follow. Mm-hmm. We have coaching on top of it with the accountability. And so it's like a system that works for sure, combined with world-class coaching and accountability. It's like a slam dunk. That's how we help someone who has had no results for 10 years or 20 years get results.
Nice.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think what it sounds like is it's like a multiple track attack. I think a lot of times when you see these body transformation programs, a lot of them lean like really heavily into like super hard exercise or really restrictive diets, but it's not the sort of a thing that's sustainable. And that's what gets people thinking that, okay, I'm going to lose it for a while, but I'm going to bring it back and completely by accident. And you're saying, no, there's a better way to do it that's reasonable with the workouts and the diet, but the radical that you experience is in the results.
By the way, I actually, my opinion is that if people lose weight too fast, that's an issue. That's a problem, because it's going to create a rubber band effect. Yeah, it's like you really lose it really fast, it's going to be unsustainable, and you'll snap right back for a lot of the guys. And so, our mantra, whatever, our phrase, our inner, kind of our, like what we tell guys to talk about is chip away. And that chip away philosophy, which is, as you know, how you get strong as hell. there are famous stories about, the guy, was it Milo carrying the
Yep.
calf up the hill?
Mhm.
Like it's a progressive chip away thing. Like that is what yields like world-class results over the long term. So anyways, like we help guys make that psychological shift from all or nothing. Oh, I didn't eat well, screw it, forget it, versus like, hey, I'm just gonna chip away and that mechanical also leads to psychological transformation where at the end they're like, oh, no, I got this.
Yeah.
I'm all good. I'm good. Like everything's cool. It's
you give
amazing.
them, you give them permission to be imperfect, knowing that they're still progressing anyway.
Exactly. It's those little. I mean, obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here. Little wins, little wins over and over and over and over and over again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, where can people find you in particular if they want to learn more about this? Where can they hear more about your programs and things like that?
Absolutely. Like, check out builtlean.com. There we've got, I have a completely free guide. We didn't go into too much of the mechanics of like, okay, like the eating and the exercise.
Sure.
I talk more about that in this free guide. And then you can also schedule a completely free breakthrough call. If you're like, hey, like this guy, Marc, he sounds like he's got, some good information. I really want to learn more, set up a free breakthrough call, really no obligations. Like, we'll talk more about your specific goals, some of the challenges you've experienced. And then we'll talk more about how we may be able to work together. And it's really an amazing call, in my opinion, for people to help them improve their health.
I highly recommend people check it out. Builtlean.com. There's going to be a link in the description/show notes, depending on where you were consuming this episode. Now, final question. Okay, what celebrity does everyone tell you look like?
That's pretty funny. It depends over the years. It used to be Freddie Prinze Jr. at one point.
There you go. That was what I was thinking.
It was Bateman for a while. When I was in the hedge fund world, I apparently looked like Patrick Bateman from
from American Psycho.
From American Psycho, who is his actual name is escaping me, but anyway.
Oh, Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, yeah, Christian Bale. That was the other one I used to hear.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's really funny, the Patrick Bateman one. Did you ever like play that up and you're like, very nice, very nice. Let's see Paul Allen's lookalike.
I used to do that totally, man. Totally.
Yeah. No, I was thinking Freddie Prinze Jr. just because it never occurred to me just until we were talking, because it's like a picture a million times, and then I think it was like the combination of like it must be the black shirt. I don't know why. I just have like this vision in my head of Freddie Prinze Jr. in these like 90s teen rom-coms, wearing black. Maybe I'm completely off, but at any rate, it is certainly a compliment because he was a handsome dude. Christian Bale, same thing. That guy's a lady killer. He's very handsome.
I'm sure he does fine for himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one time, I had kind of curlier hair and I wore glasses. Some stranger told me I looked like Andy Dick. I was like so insulted. I think I look a little bit better than him, but at any rate, yeah. So that was my reality at one point. So no longer. Well, Marc, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great catching up with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And folks, go to builtlean.com. Check out the great information there. You will be glad you did. And as always, have fun and happy training.